Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at a model of an early prototype diesel by Heljan. Frankly, I think all Heljan reviews should start with an apology, but I'm apologising this time because today's model came out in 2023, last year, and I'm only just reviewing it now. But the model is this. It is the new for 2023 Heljan 10800 diesel. And the reason I didn't review this when it first came out, you guessed it, is because of the absolutely ludicrous price. So Heljan's RRP for this was £254.95 and a typical retailer price at the time was around the £200 mark. And this was tricky for me because obviously I'm a reviewer. I like to bring you these reviews of new models as soon as they come out. And as you've seen from the past, I'm not afraid of spending the money to bring you these reviews either. But one thing I'm not prepared to do is waste my money. And as much as I'm a reviewer and I'm not supposed to be prejudiced against Heljan, and I do try not to be, there's only so many times you can experience the same outcome before you start to expect it. So no, I was not prepared to pay around £200 for this new Heljan loco. That was completely out of the question for me. Not because I'm prejudiced against Heljan's products, not because I'd already decided that it was going to be bad, but because previous Heljan models that I'd paid top dollar for had been bad and I wasn't willing to take the risk again with this model. And it turns out the risk was worth it. It paid off. These haven't sold, or at least I don't think they've sold, because if they'd sold well, why would they now be available at the retailers at 50% off? And yes indeed, Rails now have this model for £129.50. Full price £254.95, 50% off. And at that price I feel, yes, I can now justify taking the risk on this model, and I'll find out what this is like. And for the record, this is what I recommend doing with Heljan models. If you see a new release that you think is too expensive, just don't buy it, and you can save yourself a lot of money when inevitably they get discounted. Now obviously this isn't great for the manufacturer, and if Heljan delivered what customers expected of them, then I wouldn't be recommending this. But the thing is, so many times I've been disappointed by Heljan's kind of lack of competence in model manufacturing, it's brutal but true, that I feel justified in saying that. But hopefully this model will be the one that changes my mind on Heljan. Hopefully Heljan were able to produce a good quality model at that full price of £255, and hopefully I will have nothing but good things to say about this. Let's see if that's true. Anyway, if you're interested in one of these, I will include affiliate links down in the description. Don't know if I can recommend that at this point, but they're there if you're interested. But for now, let's see what this loco is like. Let's see if it's worth over 250 quid. Right, so I've been curious about this model for a really long time now, so I am really looking forward to seeing what this is like. Nice box. We've got a drawing of the loco on the front of it, so it's not just a nondescript box, which is good to see. Let me show you the version I went for then. So the product code for this is 1080, funnily enough. It is the North British Diesel 10800 with the BR early emblem, and it's in the black and silver. And we've got a good list of features here. It's ERA 4, which is useful to know. DCC ready with a 21-pin DCC socket. It has got working lights, interior lights as well, a speaker fitted, and NEM couplers. Most of those features are standard, of course, but it's nice to see at a glance what this model's got. But with that, let's open up this box, because the outside of it doesn't really reveal much more than that. I'll do it this way, I think. And let's see what greets us when we open the box. All right. Instructions. Let's see if these make sense today. Here we go. So, North British BR 10800 user manual. Here we go. Okay, a bit about the prototype then. So the specification, some history here. Feel free to pause and read this if you're interested in a bit more about this. Over on the next page, how to remove the body. So apparently the body is screwed on, not just clipped on. So that's a good start. Shows you how to do that. There's wire handrails next to the cab doors. Okay, yeah, you've got to slide the bottom of the handrails out from their locating holes. So yeah, it sounds about the usual fiddly job. There's the 21-pin decoder socket. We've got a factory-fitted speaker as well for your DCC sound needs. And here is the exploded diagram. Nice double-page spread so that it's a decent size. And yeah, it's a good complex model. Hopefully, it will have a lot of cool detail on it. We've got the centrally mounted motor here. It's kind of the standard diesel setup by the looks of it. So yeah, good quality motor, hopefully. Dual flywheels and then drive shafts to each of the bogies. Hopefully all of the mechanism will be good quality. No room for cheap mechanisms here, unfortunately, at this price. Version 2, there's another diagram. Okay, accessories and detail parts, very poor photos as usual, of course. It's got head code discs, 2 tension lock NEM couplings and NEM pocket assemblies, replacement wire handrails for each corner of the bonnet. Okay, hopefully I won't need replacements. 2 steam heating hoses and 2 replacement lamp irons. Okay, so we've got some spare parts, that's good. And it does appear to show you the location of some of the detail parts, which is useful as well. So yeah, actually these instructions do seem to be well written, which is a nice change. Right, some specs. Centrally mounted 12-volt motor with flywheels, no specification on whether it's 3 or 5 pole. DCC, lighting functions, so we've got illuminated headlamps, cab interior lights, and no tail lights, okay? Lighting functions, and over on the other page, yeah, it's just the usual stuff, but it does say that a powerful 5-pole motor is used here, so hopefully we should see some good performance out of this. Okay, well, that's the instructions. Yeah, it does seem to be pretty competent so far, but let's have a look at the model, and hopefully that will match. All right, there it is. It's a cool livery, this one, because of the silver bogies, so I'm pretty glad to have been able to pick one of these up for a reasonable price. Okay, let's lift this out. How much should a 250 quid model weigh? Apparently not that much, according to this, but things can feel different once the model's in your hand naked, without the packaging, that is. Let's have a look at the accessories then. So yeah, it seems to be as promised. The photo showed the head code discs unpainted, but here they are painted, which makes them look a bit better, as opposed to just being black shapes. We've got NEM couplings here, but we don't have the NEM pocket assemblies, and I can't see the air hoses either, so presumably those have been pre-fitted to the model. So again, decisions about the model have been changed, and the instructions haven't been updated. It's not a massive issue, but it doesn't inspire much confidence, does it? So we're deviating from the instructions immediately, but fair enough, I assume those are pre-fitted. And yeah, we've got the various spare parts that were described. Anyway, let's have a look at the logo. What is the finish like? This has got to be a really high quality finish, hasn't it, for this kind of price? Okay, well, yeah, it's not bad actually. Yeah, hopefully you can see there's a bit of a sheen there, especially if I hold it at the right angle. Yeah, that doesn't look bad at all, and there does seem to be a fair bit of detail on here, which is good. Right, let's lift it up and take a bit of a closer look then. Oh, very, very light. What? Yeah, I would not have been happy with the weight of this for 200 quid. Although the running plate here is actually die cast, so at least there's some quality there. And it appears to be straight as well, which is good to see. Otherwise, yeah, what a deeply unusual thing this is. Yeah, very, very strange. I mean, they went on to base the Class 15 on this, but it really doesn't look a lot like the Class 15, does it? No, it's very, very unusual. So, yeah, an interesting prototype. I have to say, though, I'm not seeing the masses of complexity that you would expect, given the full price of this thing. Yeah, first impressions can be deceiving, but that full price at the moment, just having looked at this briefly, does seem to have been taking advantage quite heavily, actually. But anyway, a much closer look at this in just a second, but first, here's a bit of background on the 10800 in real life. 10800 was a unique diesel locomotive built in 1950 for British Railways. During these early days of the diesel, the technology was still being explored to see if diesel locomotives could truly replace steam. The 10800 was actually designed by George Ivat of LMS fame, and as much as only one was ever built, the loco was considered a success, and the BR Class 15 was commissioned as a result, which, like I say, was a modified version of the same design. The 10800 design was able to live on through the Class 15 then, but as for the 10800 herself, she was withdrawn after less than 10 years of service in 1959 and subsequently used by Brush Traction for experiments. Up until this point, diesel electrics had used DC power between the generators and the traction motors, but locomotives were becoming too powerful for this, and so the retired 10800 was used to investigate whether an AC power solution would be viable. After these experiments, she was ultimately withdrawn in 1968 and slowly stripped for parts, finally being scrapped in the mid-1970s. So here it is, up close and personal for you, the frightfully expensive 10800 locomotive by Heljan. And I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but this is pretty much exactly as I expected. Certainly not worth £200 in my opinion, let alone over 250. And I'm actually quite confused by this because I thought, looking at that price, there must be some crazy complexity in this model for it to justify that amount of money. But no, the detailing and complexity is just pretty average, I would say. And the build quality on this model, as it is on so many Heljan models, is very poor indeed, which makes the model come across as quite amateurish, frankly. So let's start by talking about the paintwork, which is really poor actually. Quite surprising, I think, because it's a very simple livery, far simpler than some of the more colourful diesels that I've reviewed recently, which were cheaper by the way, but yeah, still they've managed to mess this up. So the factory has made several errors across the model. I count 4 different instances of this across the loco, and rather than fixing these properly or perhaps discarding the parts as no good, or indeed being skilled enough to not make so many errors in the first place, they've just covered up whatever the errors were with some black paint. And this seems to have been done after the sort of satin coat has been applied to the body, because these areas stand out as looking extremely sloppy. I mean, this is just not the sort of thing that you expect to see from a quality manufacturer, but I have to say I'm not surprised seeing this from Heljan. The other unbelievable bodge is the buffer beams. I mean, these have been painted red, but the paint has been applied so thickly that all of the detail and definition is basically lost. Yeah, it's just a complete mess. And the paint finish across the side of the running plate is just awful. It looks like the texture of a fish. It completely undermines the model, really, doesn't it? There's also paint that's chipped off the running plate straight out of the box, so the model really isn't looking the best. The model's assembly actually isn't as bad as I've seen before on Heljan's models, but it's still not the best. So we've got the buffers, which are sort of visibly wonking downwards, and the flashing on the sides of the buffers sometimes has been tidied up, sometimes it hasn't, so inconsistent. We've got the grille, which hasn't been fitted properly. As you can see, this is just kind of riding up on one end. Chunk missing off the grille on the side of the body. Not too sure what's happened there. We've got glue crusted around the glazing of the windows. Goodness me, how did that get past any quality control? Not that I think there is any. And of course you've got the usual sort of wonky details, such as this grab iron here. I've tried to straighten it, but it kind of returns to its old position, so I'm loath to mess around with that too much. It's also pretty light, so it weighs in at 274 grams, despite having the die-cast running plate. So yeah, this diesel weighs less than a 94XX pannier tank. I suppose as an early diesel the weight isn't too important, but still, really, for over 250 quid, could they not have found a way to put a bit more weight into this thing? It did feel quite light when I first picked it up. So yeah, this is a £130 model at the absolute most. I really don't know what they were thinking, trying to charge over £250. All I can say is I'm very glad that the customer has seen through that and refused to pay that price. Hopefully that will be lesson learned for Heljan. And I know people will say, oh, it's a niche prototype, people should expect to pay more for this. No, nonsense. That's just a load of rubbish, isn't it? If you're going to pay that amount of money for a model, it should be quality, and this is not. Also, fine, if you want to charge 250 quid, that's fine, but you can't force people to pay it, can you? And they haven't. If they had, this wouldn't now be down to half price and still available to buy. Yeah, I firmly think that the pricing of this model has backfired, and I'm glad about that. Anyway, the model otherwise isn't too bad. There's certainly a good level of detail to it, even though it's not as complex as I was expecting it to be. So let's talk about the other aspects of the decoration, because the kind of printed detail is really, really good. So we've got the BR Early crest here, nothing wrong with that at all, that looks great. We've got quite a bit of printed detail across the running plate, that's fine as well. And the sides of the cab, if you can overlook these sort of badly covered up errors, they look fine. We've got the builder's plate on there, running number, etc. All of that looks great. The bogies also stand out beautifully because they're painted into this silver. This has been done excellently, and the axle boxes have been picked out as well. So the bogies look fantastic, and the level of detail on the bogies is really good as well. The wheels have also been blackened quite precisely so that they look nice and convincing. And then on the underframe, we've got a few separately fitted components with some decent moulding on them. Nothing wrong with this at all. The buffer beams are fully detailed though, which is just frustrating because we've got these screw link couplings dangling right in front of the NEM pocket. So they're just going to be completely in the way if you want to fit your NEM couplings. But the other detailing has been applied, and not too badly. We've got the vacuum pipes on there, other hoses as well pre-fitted. Yeah, they look great. And we do have sprung buffers. I mean, I should jolly well hope so for the full price, but they are here, and sometimes Heljan models don't have those, so at least we've got sprung buffers. There's quite a bit of moulded detail on the bodywork, as you can see, and the quality of the moulding here is definitely not too bad. We've even got some little gauges which have been picked out on the sides of the model, and they look pretty good. We've got handrails and grab irons which are made of wire, so at least they're a bit sturdier, and these are pre-fitted. On the ends we've got electric lamps which have been pre-fitted as well, and if the diagrams are anything to go by, then these lamps are actually functional, they will work. So yeah, finally that is a premium feature. Up on the top we've got an etched grille with a little bit of detailing behind it, not the highest quality grille in the world because of the way it's been fitted, but otherwise it does look good. And we've got quite a few separately fitted parts across the top of the model, as you can see, various exhausts and such, and of course the horn, which is a separately fitted moulded piece. On the other end, we've got a ladder here, which is separately fitted. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. This has been fitted well, and it looks pretty good. We've got these little steps here, not the neatest fitted steps in the world. We've got some visible glue on them, but they look fine. And here's a look at the other end, which is pretty similar to the front really, with the separately fitted lamps, a little bit of visible glue, but not too bad. And then of course we've got the cab itself, messy glazing like I've said, and a pretty disappointing interior really. Very little in the way of painted details in here, which is a real shame. And of course we've got this big block in the middle of the cab, which doesn't look very realistic, but I can't find any images of the real 10800 cab. So possibly the centre of the cab would be out of bounds like this, although I'm not entirely sure about that. But even besides that, it's still not a dreadfully convincing cab, given how much this cost. So there you have it, not a bad level of detail at all, and of course it's not dreadfully complex, but then the real life prototype wasn't that complex. It had a simple livery and not that many external different components which need to be included on this model, which of course should have made the model relatively inexpensive to produce, except we got such a ridiculous RRP for this. And as a niche locomotive, this would be understandable if the thing was built properly, but because of the numerous quality issues that I've spotted here, that just isn't the case. Having said that, it's not been built so badly that the whole model is a complete disaster. Yes, it's a bit amateurish up close, but from a distance it looks okay. So I am still looking forward to seeing this in action on my layout. That's provided, of course, that it works properly. So fingers crossed that will be the case. Surely this will be a good runner. Not actually heard whether these models are any good or not on the track, so this will be pretty fresh for me. So let's get it onto the track, let's give it a test, and let's also take a look at the mechanism. So there she is down onto the track, and yeah, this has failed to impress up close. But you know what, from a distance like this, I really do quite like the way this looks down on the track. It does seem to be a good representation of this kind of early pioneering diesel, and I do quite enjoy unusual looking designs like this. I should say also that this is quite a bit better looking than the Class 15 that Heljan did, which is very similar to this. And if you're interested in that review, I'll pop a link in the top corner now. But yeah, this looks better than that, I would say. Anyway, I've filmed the initial performance test and running in. I'll show you that in just a second. Now though, we're going to talk about the mechanism. And yeah, the mechanism generally, again, is quite a lot better than on the Class 15, although it's still not the greatest. So looking at the base of the bogies, you can see there are no screws here, which means the bases are just clipped on. But these are easy enough to undo. I didn't have a problem with getting these off. A little bit fiddly, of course. It would have been better and more long-lasting with screws, but it's fine. And as you can see, we've got gearing to each axle, which means we've got all-wheel drive. But as you can see, there are no bearings fitted to the axles. Now, how can that be? This is one of the most expensive diesels that I've ever seen, and it's got no bearings. And I can't think of another major manufacturer that doesn't fit bearings to their expensive models now. I just don't understand it. Now, obviously, maybe Heljan just don't think that there's any benefit to having these bearings. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, there is a benefit. I've proved that there is. But even if Heljan have a good reason for not fitting them, that's 8 components that they've not got to make and fit. Why have they not passed on these savings to the customer? Yeah, I just don't get it. If this model was made on such a budget, it should have been priced as such. Anyway, if I pull out one of these axles, you can see we've got traditional wiper pickups going to each wheel, which is a good design, and the pickups do work excellently. Right, so for body removal, because the running plate is part of the chassis for some reason, you've got to go around the model and pull out all of the little handrails before you can take the body off. That's a bit irritating. Again, many other manufacturers find a way around this, not Heljan, unfortunately. At least the model uses screws to hold the chassis in place though. There are 4 screws, 2 at the front, 2 a little bit further back around the rear bogie. But again, cheap self-tapping screws. These just bite into the plastic. We've got no separately fitted threads here. Again, I'm just amazed by how cheaply made this is, given the full price of it. Anyway, with the screws out, you can remove the body. It's a tight fit, but you can get it off without too much of a problem. And here is the cast metal chassis, which is quite a tidy design, I have to say. I can't see the motor, that is behind this panel somewhere, although the instructions say that it's a powerful 5-pole motor. Now, I have to say that it performs more like a 3-pole motor, but the instructions say 5, so that's that. As for powerful though, yeah, not really. I think I can more firmly disagree with that. But it does have the flywheels as promised, and they do look to be quality, which is good. There's a 21-pin DCC decoder socket, also as promised, and a pre-fitted speaker, which has got this tape over it. I think the tape is there because the speaker is positioned directly underneath the grill, the fan grill, and the tape is there to sort of disguise the speaker, but obviously you can still see the tape through the top. And I don't quite know why the speaker is right here under the grill. Presumably it's so that you can get better sound, but obviously it doesn't look very good this way. And I don't think that you'd suddenly not be able to hear the speaker if it was moved 20 mil to the left or something like that. So yeah, that's another strange one. We've got lighting boards, which are pretty good. So each of these LEDs is positioned behind a lamp so that the lamps function. That's pretty cool. And then there's another LED here at the front of the cab, which illuminates the cab on DCC. And then for gauging, the back-to-back came in at between 14.4 and 14.5, so slightly over gauge, above the standard of 14.4, and most locos are a little bit looser than that at 14.3. However, I have to say there was no issue with performance relating to the gauging. So with that, yeah, I'd say it's a slightly above average Heljan mechanism, still not very accessible, and still a pity to not see bearings in this when almost every other model, particularly of this kind of price and much less than this kind of price too, do have that feature. But anyway, let me jump back in time and let me show you how that performance test went. Right, moment of truth. Surely this will perform decently. Well, I've been unpleasantly surprised before, so let's see. Forwards direction, let's give this a bit of juice. Here we go. Does it work? It does. All right, it was actually pretty smooth. Yeah, that's quite nice. Healthy sound to it, nice purr, not too much roaring or anything like that. Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? Really lovely. I can see we've got the lamps working, so only in the forward direction. Like the instructions said, there are no tail lights on this. But yeah, the lamp's nice and bright. You can notice them. They look excellent. No light leakage. Hornby. Yeah, excellent. Not seeing any lights coming on in the cab, so maybe they're just too dim, or perhaps they don't work on analog. No big deal while it's running though, of course. Yeah, that looks lovely. Right. What's the speed like then? Let me run by at half power for you. Give you a sense of the gearing. 50. Yep, so it's either struggling or it's been geared to run nice and slowly. I suppose we can figure out the answer by doing the torque test. So let me put my finger in front of the buffers. Can it spin its wheels with my finger there? No. Well, very, very slowly. But no, there's no torque there. Okay. So I'm not sure. It does seem like it's geared to run reasonably slowly, to be fair, but there also doesn't seem to be much power there. So I think I'll have to run this in fully and then do these tests again and figure out whether it is a decent hauler or not. But yeah, straight out of the box, overall performance seems to be great. Obviously, I will run this in before I give the performance a score, but what is the crawl like straight out of the box? Let's find out. Let's turn it up very slowly. Turning up. The lamps are just coming on. Oh, a bit more, a bit less rather. Let's try again. Nope. That's disappointing. That's the speed at which it starts. And it is smooth, so that means it's smooth at all speeds, but I've seen better crawlers. Again, when this is among the most expensive diesels I've ever seen, you would expect it to match the performance of some of the best diesels in the collection. And the reality is, they can crawl better. I am turning this up. Oh, a bit juddery in reverse there, but slightly slower. A bit more. Yeah, seems to be binding there and stalling. But it's not running yet, so we'll see how that goes. Blimey, that was rough, wasn't it? Okay, well, I think that's what I need to do next then. Let's run this in, see how it handles the layout. Here we go, half speed. Okay, it'll be quite interesting to see if this speeds up over time, and also to see whether it slows down around the second radius, will it? No. So that's good. So hopefully the torque won't be an issue for this then, and we'll find out later on when I hook this up to a bit of a train. But yeah, overall the performance seems okay. It's certainly not performing at the moment as a 255 pound locomotive should. Whether that will change after running in is yet to be seen, and hopefully it will. But yeah, at the moment I'll be looking for better torque. Hopefully this won't slow down on the curves with a load, we'll see. I'm looking for a better crawl. Yeah, I would expect it to do better than that for the price. But apart from that, yeah, the performance seems fine. It's nice and reliable. It is maintaining a constant speed without a load, and it's certainly not cutting out on the points or anything like that. So yeah, at the moment, the performance is doing what it should at a basic level. Let's let this run in fully, 30 minutes forwards, 30 minutes backwards, and then we'll see if it starts to perform as a 200 pound plus loco should do. Okay, I am back. That is running in complete. And yeah, I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised by the performance of this. I don't think it's going to break any records or anything, but the fact that it actually runs well without being deeply faulty is pleasing to me. Yes, very much so. So what can I say? Well, it's never cut out, never derailed, never had a problem with that. It does seem to be fine on the curves as well, without slowing down, without a load. I have set up some of these open wagons so that I can test it with a load in just a second, and hopefully it will be the same then. Since the last time I saw you, I fitted a NEM coupling to the back of the loco here, and actually because it's only the screw link coupling that's in the way of the coupling and no pipe work, you can just hook up the chain out the way, and then actually nothing is fouling the coupling. So that's fine, I'm not actually going to mark it down for that. Anyway, it's fully running now, so let's take a look and see how fast this runs. Is it any quicker? 50%? Yeah, I think it is slightly, yeah. as it was running in, I thought, yeah, this is getting a bit faster now. So it's a little bit less sleepy. And you know, this isn't a shunter. It is supposed to have a bit of speed to it. So I would say, yeah, this is about right. And let me just demo maximum speed for you. Yeah, I think it's a very, very sensible range of speeds. Now, when I first tested this, there was basically no torque in the mechanism whenever I put an obstruction there. So let's try that again and see if running in's fixed that. 50%. No. It slows down to nothing, as you can see. So no real power in it. I don't think we can quite call this a powerful 5-pole motor, can we? Not when there are much more powerful locos than this out there, but at least while it's sort of running without a big finger in front of it, that doesn't seem to cause any problems, which is good. Right, before running in, couldn't really crawl. That was quite disappointing. Is that any better now? Come on, powerful 5-pole motor. Time for you to become worth what we paid for you. Nope. Try again. I'm trying to ease this up as gently as I can. Yeah. Quite coggy. So no, not great. Not for 250 plus quid anyway. Yeah, laughably bad at a crawl. And I suppose its only saving grace is that it's fine in other areas. But yeah, that's not great. So at that speed that it becomes smooth. You know, it's fine, it's perfectly usable. Maybe you don't care about locos crawling. But, you know, it's part of my review, it's part of my testing. And there are, well, lots of much better locos than this at the slow end. But, you know, it's pretty good in reverse, I suppose. Let's try that again. No, still coggy. Yeah, okay. So that's probably the major downside to the performance then, not a crawler. Anyway, let's back up to those wagons and check that the coupling is at the right height, etc. Right, let's see if I can do this steadily. Oh, no, I've lost it. Well, that's fine. You're supposed to stop before coupling, aren't you? Yeah, not that controllable, really. You can do it, but it's a lot of sort of juddering and starting and stopping. Yeah, not the best. Anyway, now that it's coupled and the shunting around's done, hopefully it will be absolutely fine. So let's see if it can shift these wagons. There's not too many. There's probably 20, maybe just over that. So if she can do this, I'll say, yeah, she's absolutely fine. And she does seem to be. So let's go for about 50% speed. There you go. All right, so the theme for today's running session is kind of early diesels. I haven't got quite enough for them all to be pioneering diesels, but some of them are. I got the Class 15 on the middle line, which is what the 10800 basically turned into when they produced more of them. Yeah, not such a good model this in terms of mechanism and looks, but it is a faster runner, I would say. Don't really know whether that's a good thing or not. Can it crawl better, I wonder? I forget. Yes, it can. So that's interesting, isn't it? Better mechanism in the 10800, but not so good a performer. So I would suspect the motor for that, but I'm not sure. Anyway, there that goes. And then on the inside line, we've got the LMS 10,000, which certainly is a pioneering diesel. Here she comes. And I've run this one because, well, it's in the same sort of livery, as you can see, with the silver trim. So with that, let's catch up with the 10800 and let's see how she's getting on up the incline. Oh, and there's an odd one out in the sidings. See if you can spot which one that is. Okay, any slowing down now that it's got a load coupled to it? Hopefully not. Does seem to be maybe a little bit slower, but as long as it's constant, I don't mind that too much. Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit of slowing down, but I would say that's better than expected, given how much it slowed down when I put my finger there. So yeah, overall performance is okay. So more generally then, what do I think about this? Well, up close it obviously looks quite amateurish and badly put together. From a distance though, it certainly looks fine. I would say it looks pretty good. Performance wise, again, it's probably quite average. We do see a lot of better performers than this out there, but generally, and especially at speed, the performance is absolutely fine. Now, obviously, 250 odd quid is way too much to pay for a loco whose performance is just average, and whose appearance is only okay from a distance. But 130 quid, £129.50, which is the current sale price, I suppose makes that a little bit better. Yeah, I think you could probably justify it at that price. So yeah, if you're interested in one of these and you've seen the pros and cons of this model and you're okay with them, then yeah, I think this is something I could recommend. Obviously though, other places are selling them for quite a lot more, and I think, you know, £200 as a typical retailer price is way too much for this. You know, it's a small diesel that's not that heavy, there's not that much weight to it, it's not got that much complexity in it. Yeah, there's a few separately fitted parts and such, but it's not miles beyond what we usually see. Build quality, noticeably poor. Paint quality, noticeably poor. Mechanism, noticeably poor, etc. Yeah, there's no way on this earth that it's worth anything close to that. So don't pay the full price for this, and I have to say well done everybody for holding off and not buying these until the prices have become more reasonable. Obviously, we don't know how many of these sold at the full price, but if they are having to reduce it to half price, that would suggest that possibly it's fewer than expected. And for every one of these that sells for 130 quid instead of 200 odd, that is one person who's not wasted, you know, £70 or so of their hard-earned cash, which is a good thing, I think, for everybody except Heljan. But then they should have done better, shouldn't they, and produced a model that's worthy of its massive price tag. So yeah, mixed feelings on this. There's good and bad in it, quite a bit of good, quite a bit of bad. Please do comment down below and let me know what you think about it. Let's have some ratings then for the Heljan 10800 Loco, a very interesting pioneering diesel. The level of detail is actually pretty good. I've given this 4-star. On the whole, it is quite well done. The printed detail looks good. We've got quite a few features here really. We've got lighting, lots of accessories, some of them fitted, screw-link couplings. You've also got a good number of separate parts, including an etched grille up in the top. And of course this model has sprung buffers as well, which I like. On the downside though, the cab is very, very basic, no painted detail inside here. I feel like they could have painted some of it or perhaps given us crew. That's a bit of a disappointment. Also, when you look down inside the etched grille in the top of the engine, you can see black tape, which isn't the best. So I can't give it 5-star, but overall, yeah, the level of detail is very good. Performance on the whole is absolutely fine. I've given it 4-star. It's a nice, reliable runner. It seems to be sensibly geared, I would say. Nice and smooth, no cutting out on the points, no derailing, no even slowing down on the curves, even with a decent load. The torque isn't the greatest though, although this doesn't affect it too much, so I'm not really going to mark it down for that. It can't crawl, however, which is a bit of a shame. I would have expected better from a Loco that costs this much. Pulling power then, the tractive effort is 0.37 newtons, or around 23 coaches on straight and level track. And despite weighing the same as the Class 15, this is actually a good bit less powerful than the 15 because of the lack of torque. Again though, no major issues here because it can haul a decently sized train without any problems. Mechanism then, not quite as good. I've given it 3.5-star. It's got some good aspects to it. I mean, it has all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup as well. Apparently it's got a 5-pole motor. It does have dual flywheels as well. On the downside though, the bogies are clipped together, which is not great. No bearings on the driving axles. Really poor accessibility as well. If you want to get to the gear train, that's annoying. Removing the body's annoying as well because of all the handrails that you've got to pull out. Cheap self-tapping screws, etc. Yeah, so for these things I've knocked it down to 3.5-star. I think if anything that's quite generous. Quality then, this is the weakest aspect of the model, I suppose, besides value. Yeah, not the greatest. I mean, it does have the die-cast running plate, which is nice and straight, and that means that the model is a bit heavier than it otherwise would have been, but it is still a bit on the light side. I do have far heavier models than this that are of a similar size. We've also got quite a few issues in the paintwork, as we saw. Overpainting on the buffers, bodged paintwork fixers with what looks like bits of black paint. Finish of the die-cast section, not great. A few wonkily fitted parts as well as visible glue. So I've given it 2.5-star, only half marks for quality here because there was a number of issues. On to value for money then, which is just an absolute joke. Can't believe the full prices of these. So £254.95 was the RRP, and these were available for around £200 at the retailers initially. Now that is just insane. I mean, when your typical Accurascale loco is £169.99, this really is just taking the mickey, isn't it? And I know people say, oh, why do you always mention Accurascale? Well, because they're the best. They offer massively impressive models at very reasonable prices, so that's why. It would seem that the 10800s haven't sold at those silly prices though, because now they've been knocked down to £129.50, which is 50% off. That's obviously a lot better. Unfortunately for me though, I jumped the gun and bought one of these before the 50% reduction. So I bought mine during the first round of reductions for £153.95, which is dangerously close to the price you'd pay for a good quality Accurascale loco without any reductions. And obviously even this much of a reduction wasn't successful because they still had 10800s to clear, and now we see them at half price. So what I would say is this: anything above £130 is just totally not worth it. I wouldn't do it, even if you were to get a good quality example. The model just doesn't have the complexity to justify that price. At 50% off though, if you are a fan of the prototype, I would say go for it. If you've got any major issues, quality problems, etc., you've still got the right to send it back for a refund or a replacement, so you've got nothing to lose. I think that price is fair enough. I'd give it maybe 3-star. Otherwise though, yeah, don't touch it with a barge pole. I give it 2-star on value, really not worth it. So overall then, that is 6.54 out of 10, or a grade of F. Yeah, unfortunately just too many things about this were a bit of a letdown, so I do have to fail it. Into the logbook it goes, 29th place above the Pico Small England and below the Bachmann USA 440. So I would say this is not a complete disaster. I think I have seen worse from Heljan for sure, but I would only recommend this at £130. Anything else is too much for this, I think. Well, there you have it then folks, that will just about do it for my review of Heljan's still pretty new 10800 diesel. And yeah, I think for a Heljan loco this is above average. It's better than normal, I would say. On the grand scheme of 00 gauge locomotives though, I would say it's still not quite up to scratch, is it? Yeah, quality not quite what it should be. Same for the mechanism. A bit confusing really, given how much this was originally. But yeah, quite enjoyed this. I do like my unusual locos, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I do like the sort of history and background of the loco. So there are things to be enjoyed about this, that's for sure. And if you are interested in picking one of these up, check out my affiliate links in the description. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you again very soon for another review. All right, cheers folks, you take care.